Hey everyone, my name is Rob Wu, CEO and founder of Coswalks. Welcome to our webinar today. For the folks who are here right now, you joined early, so thank you for showing up early and on time. A few housekeeping items to note before we begin. This session is being recorded as well as slides will be sent out tomorrow, uh, tomorrow morning, most likely. So we do have a lot of slides to go through today, and there's a bunch of screenshots and a lot of resources too. So you'll get that tomorrow in your inbox. I did release now a welcome poll. So feel free to answer some of these questions here as we begin. The first one is, will artificial intelligence replace us all? So feel free to figure out which team you're on. If you're on team robot or team human, or you're undecided, feel free to answer that one. We do have another question here, which is, what is your ChatGPT competence level? I'd love to hear from you because I want to kind of tailor this conversation we're having today a little bit so that it meets the expectations and the things that different skill levels are looking for. And very lastly in our poll is, what is your role at your organization? I'd love to kind of tailor this presentation as well. So we will be getting started shortly. In the meantime, sit back and relax, get a cup of coffee, tea, or whatever floats your boat. We will be getting started very shortly. I'll be back in just a minute. For those that just joined us, my name is Rob Wu, CEO and founder of Coswalks. Welcome to our webinar today, ChatGPT for Nonprofit Fundraising, how AI can help you engage donors and drive donations. It's a mouthful. Actually came up with that subject line and title for this webinar through ChatGPT. It recommended it to me, so it made it into this presentation. A lot of our presentation today has been created by ChatGPT with assistance, of course, from myself, an actual human, and not a robot. So I'm excited to share with you how we've co-created this webinar about ChatGPT through ChatGPT. So that'd be an interesting thing. A few housekeeping items to start. My name is Rob Wu, CEO and founder of Coswalks. I will be your lead presenter today, actually your own presenter, so flying solo today. This session is being recorded, so it will be sent to you, the recording, tomorrow, as well as all the slides will be sent to you tomorrow as well. So if you can't join us the whole time, feel free to reference this video recording as well as the slides and watch it at your own time. As we're waiting for the top of the hour, we do have a few questions in our welcome poll today. The first question is, will artificial intelligence replace us all? You get to decide if you're with Team Robot or Team Humans. And so far, Team Humans is in the lead with 65% believing that, 66% now, believing that artificial intelligence will not replace us all. So that's reassuring, not only for myself as a human, but also my job. The second question is, what is your ChatGPT competence level? Feel free to chat us in your response over here. It looks like most folks, 48%, haven't touched it at all. So that's amazing. While 30% believe that they are beginners. So the majority of folks on this webinar, over 87% in real time, the numbers are just changing, haven't touched ChatGPT at all, which means this is a huge opportunity for me to kind of share with you just a few tips on how you can use ChatGPT. And our last question with our ChatGPT and nonprofit fundraising webinar today is, what is your role at your organization? So it looks like our audience today, as folks are signing in, 43% say they're in fundraising, 11% say they're in communications, and 39 or 40% say they are in executive leadership. So welcome leaders, managers, fundraising, communication folks. Thank you for joining our webinar today. We will be getting started in just a minute. And I'm going to repeat what I just said for the 60, 70 plus people who just joined right now. So thank you so much for joining our webinar today, ChatGPT for Nonprofit Fundraising. My name is Rob Wu, CEO and founder of CauseWalks. This session is being recorded. Slides will be shared tomorrow. Just a few things I want to point out. One is that we do have our welcome poll. Feel free to put any answers on the 3 questions that we have, as well as I want to make this session as interactive as possible. I don't have a co-presenter today. It's just me. So it feels like I'm just talking to nobody in my home office. So feel free to chat in any questions into the Q&A box in the Zoom interface, or you could just use the chat function as well. To get started with the chat function, feel free to let me know who you are and where are you calling in from. Feel free to put it into the webinar chat box. I'd love to see who I'm talking with. We have a ton of people on this webinar today, so I'd love to know who I'm chatting with. In addition to that, if you have any questions or any feedback or any ideas or any tips you want to share with other people in the audience today, feel free to chat it in too. I'd love to hear from you. After our webinar today, I'm going to go through all the responses, and during the webinar, I'll try to respond to as many chats and react to it as much as I can. So thank you so much for that. All right, so we are at the top of the hour, so let's get started. So just in review, with our welcome poll, it looks like the folks who answered it believe that they're with Team Humans, so Team Humans for the win. But strangely, 26% of you are on the fence, robots versus humans. So that's very questionable, 26%. The second question is, it looks like most people today are either beginner or haven't touched ChatGPT at all, with a good contingent, 17% being intermediate or above. So that's very, very surprising. And then third, looks like most folks in our webinar today are in the fundraising function, with communications being second. And then we have a bunch of folks, 33% of people being in leadership. So that's amazing to see. All right, so let me just end the poll real fast and call it a day on that one. All right, so welcome to a webinar today, ChatGPT for Nonprofit Fundraising, how AI can help you engage donors and drive donations. I'm flying solo today, so just me on this webinar. I am the CEO and founder of CauseWalks. So I started this company about 14 years ago, just out of the bedroom with my co-founder, Jeff Chang. He's the CTO of CauseWalks. And we had the singular mission to help nonprofits bridge the gap between fundraising and technology. So what happened was we built a crowdfunding platform and we grew exponentially from there. So today, what we do is we help out thousands of nonprofits every year with donation pages, peer-to-peer fundraising, crowdfunding, event ticketing, all the digital fundraising stuff that you need in order to get donations. Really, one of the big accomplishments of what we've done so far is just making it really easy for nonprofits to have a fundraising tools where they can go in, create it themselves on a low budget while still doing all themselves without having a big team. We do offer a ton of support over here at CauseWalks as well. So if you need education, one-on-one help, or just fundraising resources in general, we do have a free library of that. And very lastly, we provide more of a one-on-one touch with our customer support. So if you need help, you'll talk to a real human. You won't talk to a ChatGPT robot. All right, so very lastly, over here on CauseWalks, I help you a ton of stuff. So use cases include donation pages, donation forms, crowdfunding, peer-to-peer fundraising, all that good stuff. So if you want to learn more, you can go to causewalks.com/schedule a demo. I definitely need to put this into our chat box real fast. You can take a quick demo. It's a video recording, or you can schedule something one-on-one with one of our team members. So feel free to check us out. All right, so as a builder, in my experience, what I love to do is I just love to find tools to use, because one of the cool things is that with tools, you can actually make yourself more productive. And with tools, you can actually accomplish a lot more than what you can do with just people power or process power. So when ChatGPT came out a few months ago, and we've been experimenting with AI over here at CauseWalks for a while, I wanted to see what are some of the use cases that I can apply not only to my own work, but also to the work that nonprofit professionals have to do. So I started experimenting with this. My hypothesis was that, like any tool, there's going to be a steep learning curve where you go in, experiment, play around with it, and fail. And then you can really figure out how you can integrate it into your own workflow as well as your own work process. So what is ChatGPT? The best response here is from ChatGPT. This is just a screenshot of it. So I decided to actually create this webinar with the help of ChatGPT about ChatGPT. So it's kind of interesting where some of the responses, some of the things that you get today are actually just formulated from this ChatGPT. So this is just a screenshot over here. ChatGPT is a AI language model created by this company called OpenAI. It's a free tool you can use. Essentially, it's a chatbot that's really, really smart. It's been trained on all the stuff, all the internet content, where it knows how to process questions and language. It can figure out what you're trying to ask it, what you're trying to do, even if you're just typing in vague instructions. And then it'll help you answer questions, generate ideas, write responses, write emails, all the stuff that takes a lot of creativity and heavy lifting. It gets you to a point where you can get to a very great first draft. So that's what ChatGPT is. GPT just really stands for generative, meaning that it can generate content pre-trained, as in it's been trained on everything on the internet almost, and T is for transformer as a tool. So what's interesting about ChatGPT is that it's grown exponentially. In the past few months after it was launched, it reached 100 million users within 2 months. So by comparison, something like TikTok and Instagram, it's taken those two companies 9 months and 30 months respectively. So I actually use ChatGPT today more than I use social media. I'm on ChatGPT a lot more, mainly because I work a lot. So it's one tool that really helps me instead of distracts me like Instagram and Facebook. And with this, I went on this journey of figuring out, okay, let me just figure out some of the questions that nonprofits would use. In one of my previous experiences, I ran a nonprofit, and then for the past decade, I've been helping thousands of nonprofits raise billions of dollars. So I was like, well, let me try to figure out from a fundraising side as well as the communication side, what kind of questions, what kind of things that folks can do and ask in order to help streamline it and just offload some of the nitty gritty stuff that's just not really fun to do. So I started asking a bunch of questions. And one of the interesting things is that, well, as I'm asking these questions, there's actually a lot of problems that nonprofits have, nonprofit professionals. When you look at nonprofit professionals in the work that we do, we're wearing a lot of different hats. We're under-resourced. And as a result, 45% of nonprofit employees, when they were surveyed, said they plan to leave their organizations in the next 2 years. This causes a lot of issues. For more experienced folks, the issues include trying to hire the right folks or trying to on-ramp the right folks as they have staff turnover, especially for the leadership here today, the 33+% of folks. This is a huge problem as you're having turnover of staff, you're always constantly having to train them. For junior folks, it's really about burnout, where you have too much to do without a lot of time and without a lot of tools and processes to help equip you. So just huge problems in terms of wearing a lot of different hats, having burnout, having attrition. The other big problem is that unlike companies, nonprofits don't get a lot of feedback from their donors. So their donors actually just essentially ghost them. They don't come back the next year and you don't know why. So 29% of first-year donors actually, this is a very low percentage, actually return to make a donation the second year. There's a very low percentage of folks actually return to make a donation. And the very last part is that the work of fundraising communications is converging, where traditionally you have on the left side, you have fundraising, on the right side, you have communications, and they're very separate functions with a little bit of overlap. As we progress into a more digital nature and a hybrid nature, the work of fundraising is becoming more like communications, and the work of communications is becoming more like fundraising. So with this backdrop of all these three problems, the question is ChatGPT a solution to help solve some of these problems? Will it make fundraising professionals and the work that they do in their lives easier, as well as communication professionals, or will it not? So is it a magical solution? It's like a magic wand that can just fix everything? Or is it more like a calculator where it can offload some of the mental load and some of the nitty gritty, not so fun stuff that fundraising professionals and communications professionals have to do? Or is it just hype? Is it just like crypto and NFT and whatever Shiba tokens like in the past few months that were out there? Like, which one is it? My conclusion after experimenting with this is more like a calculator. It's something where I remember being in math club, which is a club for nerds, where we just love to do math. It's having a calculator was the essential tool um, that helped you solve these really complex problems. And that's the same thing here. Today, everybody knows how to use a calculator that helps us solve basic problems that we don't have to do. For example, like going out to eat, dining in a restaurant doesn't have to turn into math class at the end of the meal because we have calculators. We can calculate tip very easily. So that's what I found with ChatGPT. It's a solution that allows me to work more creatively, as well as it helps me work faster. So today, what I want to do for the rest of our presentation is to go over kind of a screen share of ChatGPT of how it actually works, plug in a few use cases, fundraising use cases specifically. So you can access ChatGPT by going to chat.openai.com/chat. You have to create a free account, and you can just go in there and experiment with me as I go through this presentation. There are a few general use cases that you can use ChatGPT for, just overarching. This includes idea generation. So if you're looking for ideas on your next fundraising event or some fundraising ideas, you can plug it in and you can ask it. And what it'll basically do is instead of spending, let's say, an hour on Google searching for fundraising ideas, it'll just condense all of that into a response so you can get to insight very quickly. You could also use ChatGPT as a writing assistant where it could check your spelling and grammar. It could condense and summarize information really easily. It basically makes your writing process a lot more efficient. It can work like a search engine as well, so almost like a Google replacement. The challenge with this and one of the limitations is that it summarizes information. So if you're looking for outlier information, or if you're just a really great Googler, you may not enjoy some of the responses that you get back from ChatGPT. You could also use it as an analyst, although I found that it's not so great at analyzing data in data sets. It's actually grossly inaccurate. So I wouldn't trust ChatGPT to analyze a data set that I feed to it. I just haven't gotten a lot of great responses from that. It's very, very inaccurate, but it's been very accurate as a content repurposer. So meaning that you could feed it like a fundraising appeal and ask it to create some tweets or to create a summary, or to create a fundraising email. It does a really great job of doing that. So I have some use cases over here that I want to go over. So this includes donation pages, fundraising emails, donor meetings, campaign planning, and storytelling on how you can use ChatGPT for this. So let me just share my screen, my other screen real fast. All right, so what I'm going to do next is show you my ChatGPT browser window, and let's see how you can use it to optimize and enhance your donation page. So let's do this. If you're following along, you can click on the link that just dropped into the webinar chat, create your own ChatGPT account, and then you can kind of experiment with that as well. Of course, I see like a ton of folks just joined us in the past few minutes. Feel free to put any questions into the webinar chat, as well as put into the Q&A section of the Zoom interface, and we'll try to get these questions answered. So when you first log into ChatGPT, this is kind of an interface you'll see. I'm on a paid account because there's this thing that happens where ChatGPT gets overloaded with too many users, and I don't want that issue during our webinar today. So I decided to kind of sign up for a free account, sign up for a paid account. So let's say you have a donation form that kind of looks like this. This is just a CosBlocks donation page, one of our typical ones where you have a logo. You have kind of a form over here with one-time gifts, recurring gifts, and donation amounts. So let's say that I'm trying to figure out how I can optimize my donation tiers over here, which are these amounts that show up, the $25, $50, and $100. And one of the things I can ask ChatGPT is saying, hey, let's say my average donation is $75. So I see this from my CosWalks account, or see it from my donor management system, whatever system that I'm using. Let me figure out kind of what 5 donation amount that I could use. So you could just ask the ChatGPT, write in this prompt, and essentially it'll type out a response to you. I'm not exactly sure why they kind of generate the text like a typewriter, but that's just how it works. So the response it'll give you is that you can use 25, 50, 75, 100, and 250. And it kind of explains to you the reason why. As a fundraising professional, I actually think this is like not a bad response. It's not something that's super insightful. Of course, garbage in is garbage out, and I didn't really give it too much info. I just gave it an average donation of $75, but actually follows a lot of best practices where you have donation tiers below the average amount and significantly higher donation tiers above your average donation amount. So I actually see this as a pretty great response, where then I can go into my donation page on CosVox and then punch in these numbers as my custom donation tiers. And then there I have it. I have something that can really help me decide on what donation amounts to use. So then what I can do next is, let's say I want ChatGPT to use these donation tiers over here to 25, 50, 75, 100, and 250, and then tie it to something that's a little bit more impactful, like $25 helps one student. So I want to generate some descriptions related to this. So let's see what it gets back. So just to answer a few questions that came in, I'm on the Plus version, which is the exact same interface and functionality as a free version. The only thing that's different is that with the Plus version, I have higher priority to access the system. And that is very necessary in a live session like this, where this session would be useless if I was not able to access ChatGPT. So for most folks, you can just stick on a free version. It'll give you the same results. All right. So I asked ChatGPT, okay, great, you've given me those donation tiers for my donation form, tie it to impact, and generate a description. So, and this is what it came back with, where actually it's pretty good, where $25 helps one student, and this is what I prompted it to do. It actually gave some of these other descriptions, which are really great. $50 helps education, 75 achieve goals. I don't think this is like the best, but it gives me like a framework to go by, where then I can generate some ideas, maybe tailor this a little bit, and then use this as a starting point for my descriptive tiers. And then what I can do is, let's say I want to have descriptive tiers over here. If I have a donation form, a donation page that supports this, that I can tie the specific amount to a specific amount of impact. All right, so let's do something else too. Let's say, give me 3 options for a donate button call to action text. All right, so this is something interesting something interesting as well, where as you're creating your donation page, maybe you want to test like the different button text. So what you could do is ask ChatGPT to give you some options here. And one of the things that's interesting is that this conversation is in context to your previous questions and responses. So, for example, invest in a brighter future. It's tied to the education theme that I asked the question before. So it basically gives you a response that's a little bit that is in context to the conversation thread so far. So these give you some options. It's kind of interesting. So it gives me a starting point to think about what kind of text to use. And let me go with a different prompt too. Let's say I have my donation page, and then I want to thank a donor. I want to provide a thank you receipt template to put into my donation page platform so that my donors are sent something automatically. So let's see what ChatGPT comes back with. Okay, so it's generating a donation receipt. And this is basically what it says. As some merge tags over here. It's thanking the donor. It's telling donors the impact of their donation. And it's thanking the donors again. and then thank you donors again. So I wouldn't say this is the best like format. One of the things you can do in order to get to a great thank you email is feeding it a little bit more content, which I'll go over in another example. So this is some of the things you can do with ChatGPT on your donation page. All right. The next thing I want to do is let's start a new thread over here, and let's talk about fundraising emails. So let's just ask ChatGPT, what are some of the best practices for fundraising emails? So you use ChatGPT as from a research perspective, especially if you're a beginner fundraiser, you're not exactly sure what to do, or if you're doing like a fundraising technique or tactic for the first time. This provides some basic research. You're kind of using it as a search engine almost. So instead of reading 10 articles created by CosWalks, you can just ask ChatGPT for kind of a summary of this. So it's kind of giving me some best practices here, like using a clear subject line, personalizing the email, having clear call to action. You know, all this stuff just makes sense. And all these are best practices. So let's be more specific. Let's say I'm at a nonprofit, we do STEM programs. So let's see what kind of best practices they give us. Okay, I wouldn't say kind of the responses here are totally rocket science, and it's actually too long. So I can ask ChatGPT to shorten this. It's too long to read. I don't want to read it. You guys don't want to read it. So let's just kind of see the highlights. Okay, highlight impact, use engaging language. You know, that's great. So let's go back to earlier where it said, you know, to write a fundraising email, you have to have a clear subject line. So I think a lot of us write fundraising emails, and one of the hardest parts is writing a subject line. We are able to do A/B testing, of course, through like our newsletter services, but generating a great idea sometimes is kind of difficult. So let's say I need some help doing that. And I can ask ChatGPT this, say, hey, my nonprofit works in a STEM space. Give me 5 examples of compelling subject lines. So here we go. We just generated 5 different ideas. Now we have empower the next generation, enjoy the fight for a better future, support can help close the STEM gender gap, unlocking the power of STEM, help us ignite curiosity and creativity in young minds, and transform lives through STEM education. Make a donation today. Now, one of the things that you can do to refine this is kind of feed it a little bit more context, saying, hey, for example, my nonprofit works in the STEM space, work with kids, for example, K to 5. Give me 5 examples of compelling subject lines. So let's rewrite this one. So I'm going to say rewrite based on my STEM program that helps kids ages 3 to 5 years old. So as you give them more specific details, then it can tailor some of the responses and some of the ideas that you get back. So I would say this is pretty impressive. You're asking it questions, it allows you to generate some ideas. It kicks off the creative process. You're not starting from a blank page. That gives you something to go with. I wouldn't say you'll get anything that's rocket science, that's amazing, that's a Picasso, for example, but you'll get something that's decent, that's good. You know, it's good enough. So a lot of times the work that we do over here at nonprofits, good enough is all we need. We don't need the best. We're not creating art. So I like this. So, and one of the things you can also do too that I found to be really useful is, you know, let's say your organization has a specific brand persona, like you're more of a fun, humorous type of organization. So I can ask it to rewrite these subject lines to have more of a humorous tone. So let's see. Oh, little Einstein. So join our mission to turn playtime into science time for little Einsteins. You know, that's kind of a humorous tone. Or let's say you want to make it a different tone, rewrite to have a more casual tone. So I found it really useful in general when I'm using ChatGPT, it has this ability to just shift tones and writing styles very, very quickly. Now, for me, I write in a very concise format. I don't like to use a lot of words, and I'm not very humorous when I write. So for me, like if I know a specific audience I'm trying to communicate with or specific individual, then this will help me tailor some of that content very easily and generate multiple variations very quickly. All right. And then let's ask it to build out a fundraising email. All right, let's use the use number one. Use the example number 5 and build out a fundraising email outline. All right, so far, we asked ChatGPT for some fundraising email best practices, and then we asked it to generate some ideas for subject lines for your fundraising email. And then we shifted some of the tones so that it matches your audience or your nonprofit. And now we selected one of the fundraising email subject lines, and we asked it to build out a fundraising email outline. So let's see what it comes back with. Great, has a subject line. So recognize what number 1 meant. And then it gives me an outline in terms of what should go into the email. And then it gives me an outline for the call to action and closing. All right. Well, I think it's pretty good. You know, it's something that's very interesting where it allows you to kind of just build out the framework of your email really quickly. And let's say the last thing I wanted to do is give it this prompt where let's tailor this to something that's more specific, like a $30,000 fundraising campaign. So I prompted it saying, hey, we are launching a $30,000 fundraising campaign to create an elementary school kids STEM program. Okay, so it decided to give me a different subject line. And then it gives me an intro with the program. And something that's really interesting here is that it even recognized like my specific program, which is magic and STEM. And it suggested that I share some examples of how science and magic will be combined, such as chemistry, to create colorful potions or using physics to create illusions. So I think this is pretty incredible where it could take just some loose concepts that I gave it and actually generate some ideas for the programming that happens at the STEM program. All right, so this is what you do. I think it'll save you a bunch of time in terms of hours generating the initial output of it. You know, a lot of times we see just fundraising campaigns with emails and appeals just very generic, and I think it's generic because whoever wrote it just didn't have enough time to kind of create different versions, test different versions. So these are some of the tools that can really help you get there. All right, let's move on to donor meetings. All right, as I'm getting that set up, you know, I think one of the interesting things that I did here is for donor meetings, it allows you to do prospect research. So let me start that. So let's say you're doing a donor meeting with a major gift prospect pretty soon, and you're trying to figure out, you know, who this person is. You know, a lot of major gift folks that I talk to, what they do is they actually just Google a person. They Google a person. They may have like other tools to use, like LinkedIn, or they stalk Instagram. They're basically like private investigators. So one of the things I wanted to experiment with as part of this use case is if ChatGPT can give you a great contact summary or a contact report. So I'm going to put in my own name here, and we'll see what it gives back to me. All right, so this is me. I gave it a prompt of give me a person summary of Rob Wu, CEO of CosVox. Okay, this is what it gives me, and let's see how hilarious this is or accurate it is. So I'm a dedicated, passionate entrepreneur. I guess that's true. Okay, I'm committed to leveraging technology. Okay, that's accurate. Okay, this part is accurate too. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Coswalks is kind of what we do. Okay, that's accurate too. I don't have a degree in double E from UCLA. Oh, I didn't know I had a master's in public policy from Harvard. That's news to me. So this is definitely not the right Rob Wu. And I have never worked here either. So I think basically the data set that ChatGPT is working with is referencing the incorrect Rob Wu. So I think if there are common names, then it has trouble tying the information together. This thing is pretty accurate in general. I do have experience in the nonprofit sector. This stuff is kind of fluff over here that can be implied. Okay, and this is numerous awards and accolades. I don't think I've received that many accolades, but this is generally accurate. Okay, and then this is about right too. So I think the output of this is 50% accurate. So yeah, this is a bunch of fluff. So let's see if ChatGPT can get a little bit more specific. Questions are coming in that, yes, this will be recorded. You'll get the recording as well as the slides. So if you have to jump off, feel free to jump off. Thank you for joining. All right. So I asked it to be more specific, and it basically just gave me more fluff. Okay. Let's see if I can get really personal here. Okay. Where is he located? So I'm located in the US, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Well, I was based in New York City. I'm no longer based there. So generally accurate. I think one of the limitations with ChatGPT is that its data set, its training model was until data from 2021, I believe. So any information after that, it doesn't really have it. Let's get more personal here. Well, he can't tell me. Okay, ChatGPT can't say if I have kids. Let's see, generation. Okay, well, it kind of gives me like a, I mean, this is pretty rough. It's almost too rough, and it's actually useless because it's giving me a range between 1965 and 1996. So I wouldn't really trust this. I ran some other prompts before, and then it gave you a more accurate answer, as in it was dead on saying I was a millennial. Does he speak English? Okay, this is good enough. So the conclusion here with donor research is that it gives you it gives you something. So, if I wasn't able to find information about a donor prospect, I would basically use this as kind of a last resort, just to kind of see if any other insights I can get. So obviously, if this wasn't me, then I could use UCLA as kind of a filter in LinkedIn to try to figure out if I can find more info, or I could use some of these other organization data points as a filter to better understand or research online my donor prospect. All right. So that's kind of interesting. All right. The next thing you can do is you can use ChatGPT to schedule donor meetings. So, for example, instead of like trying to create a email template to reach out to your donor prospects to book a meeting with them, you can ask ChatGPT to do that. So let's see if we go down here. So I asked it to write me a clear and concise email to a donor to schedule a donor meeting. Let's see what it gives us here. So it has an intro here. It gives you something like this, schedule a time. Okay, well, I think this is not bad. It's perfectly serviceable. If you're early on in your career as a frontline fundraiser, this is probably an email that you would send somebody. If you're just like a first year fundraiser with some light customization and personalization to it, so it's not bad. But I think if you're an experienced fundraiser or you're an executive, you probably wouldn't use this email. You would take this as a starting point and then tailor it to your own language. or tailor it to your own tone, and then you could use this. So, but it still gives you something that's better than nothing. I'm going to ask it to rewrite with a more professional tone. So one of the interesting things I like to do is just changing the tone and style, because every organization is a little bit different. And then it completely rewrites this in a more professional tone that is pretty accurate. Or if I want to make it rewrite it in a casual tone, then it could do this too. It went very far from professional to casual here with media requests for a super cool donor. But you can tell that it does have a lot of personality. It can really, it can hit the tone dead on when you specify it. All right. The last thing I want to show you here with donor meetings is on summarizing donor meeting notes. So let's say you met with this guy named Rob at your donor meeting, and then you jotted down a few notes. For example, here, I'm gonna put this in. So you met with Rob, he's based in Austin. We'll stop talking about van life. I do like van life. I don't live in a van, but I live in a van on the weekends. And I have an opinionated toddler. He's my second boss. Blah, blah, blah. I like STEM programs. I like the newsletters that the nonprofit sends, and I want to volunteer more. So those are the bullet points that I got from a donor meeting. Ooh, let me see. So let me retry this one more time. All right. So I just asked it to summarize these meeting notes. And it did. It cleaned up the notes. It made it a little more readable. And also what I can do is I can summarize this into something that's a little shorter too. So let's say I want to pass a report to my boss or a director or my board. What I could do then is take my meeting notes and summary and then ask ChatGPT to summarize it into a few characters. So I could just copy and paste this into Slack or provide it into a report. Or if I'm tracking this in a spreadsheet with my donor prospects, then 150 characters is a lot more digestible than just bullet points of meeting notes. So something you can do too. All right. So I think that's pretty amazing. I found that ChatGPT for donor meetings, prospect research, not so great. Writing emails to schedule a donor meeting and a follow-up, pretty good. Writing meeting notes and summarizing it, I would say is excellent. So you could use that for your fundraising as well. All right, let's move on to campaign planning. All right, campaign planning. But before we begin on that one, let me just kind of glance at some of the questions. If you have any questions at any time, feel free to chat us in. One question for Gene is, for meeting notes, will asking for bullets work? That's a great question. Let's ask ChatGPT. So the answer is yes. ChatGPT will put bullet points into your long form paragraph and meeting notes. So it allows you just to organize and structure it. You can even ask it to use fewer bullet points or more, depending on like what your specific meeting note format. But allows you to do this. It saves a bunch of time instead of having to go line by line and adding bullets. So love it. All right, let's do a new chat over here and let's talk about campaign planning. Right, campaign. So at CosWalks, we help a lot of nonprofits do fundraising campaigns. So they use our online software for crowdfunding campaigns, peer-to-peer fundraising, donation pages. This is just a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign that is about to end on our platform. It's built on our campaign site. So it has kind of the progress bar, video, has some general content over here. Below that, they have a section for sponsors, and then a section for peer-to-peer fundraising. So I'm just using this as an example here because I think they have some pretty good content over here that I want to use for our example. So let's say this Janathon campaign here by Invest in Kids. They have this great fundraising appeal about what the event is, as well as the impact. And let's say I want to use this and to generate a social media plan. So what I can do is Let's prompt ChatGPT with creating a social media calendar for a fundraising campaign. Below is the main campaign appeal. So let me just copy this appeal here, paste it in here. That's a lot of text. So just give you the prompt here. Create a social media campaign calendar for a fundraising campaign. Below is the main campaign appeal, and I just copy and pasted in the content from their peer-to-peer fundraising campaign. Okay, let's see what ChatGPT comes back with. Right, so we have a social media calendar here based off of the content. So the event is happening March 3rd, I believe. So ChatGPT was able to work backwards to create a fundraising plan and calendar. So week 1, it says I should start in mid-February and post on Facebook, share about this, use these hashtags. So I think that's pretty incredible, where it's asking specific things, sharing impact stories. I think this is great. A lot of organizations, what they would jump to in a social media plan is just to include a donate link and ask for donations in the very beginning. But ChatGPT, based on what it knows, says, hey, you should share stories and encourage followers, engage in impact. So I think this is pretty good. Week 2, share information on how to register, post on some additional channels. Okay, this is great. This is kind of almost a rehash of week 1, which is about right. Week 3, countdowns. Okay, this is great. Okay, I think it got kind of redundant, but this gives you a framework to break it down week by week. One of the things I will add to this is to include in the prompt itself a link to the campaign site so that it can be included in some of these plans over here. And just for review purposes, I just see a question here. Here's the prompt that I asked it. So this is pretty good. So let's ask ChatGPT to create 3 tweets that we can use for week 1. Okay, so based off of the social media plan that I created, let's say I don't tweak it at all, which should never happen. You should also spend a little bit of time tweaking it. I asked it to generate some tweets I could just use. So let's see. This is pretty good. You know, it has the date, it's branded to Janathon. Great. Even has the Twitter handle to my organization, and it has a place for me to put in the campaign site over here. So it's pretty good. You know, let's see. This one, this is kind of interesting, different tone over here. So I like this one too. And this one is more fundraising focused. And then it's branded to the dinosaur school. So I think these are pretty good for just kind of social media content, because a lot of social media content has a very short half-life, meaning that it decays almost immediately once it's posted. So how great a piece of content is on social media, like how it's written, a lot of times it's not worth investing a lot into. So I think using ChatGPT to generate ideas for tweets and Facebook posts is pretty good. So let's see what it could do if I wanted to have like a short 1-minute video script. So the idea is that for week 3 on my social media calendar, I want to post a video. This is what ChatGPT is coming back with. Okay, so it's giving me kind of like this, what it looks like is a pretty complicated video because there's voiceover, there's a lot of cuts, there's more voiceover, there's an interview. This is going to be too hard and not worth the investment. So I'm going to ask it to redo this, which is a more of a talking heads style of video that is more realistic for what a small nonprofit could do. All right, so it basically rewrote this video script so that has 2 people and they're talking about the event. It's repurposing some of the content that I gave it into a video script. And I think it's pretty decent. It's pretty good. So what I would do next is I would take this draft, I would review it with my team, we would tweak it, and then we can get to a final product very quickly. I think this in itself probably would save at least 1 or 2 days worth of work. So I think that's pretty amazing when it comes to that. So let's say with this campaign site too, as we shift gears away from social media more to the campaign site, let's say I'm designing my peer-to-peer campaign or my fundraising campaign, whether it's on a platform like Cosvox or on my website, I kind of need to figure out how it looks, or at least some best practices when it comes to it. So as part of my campaign, I want to figure out maybe some taglines and campaign names that I can use. So I'm asking it to create 3 different campaign name taglines. So here are 3 campaign taglines. There's Ski for a Cause. So I think it's pretty good. The Shred for Good. I think that's a take off of the snowboarding event. And the last one is not that great. So I could say you can actually be mean to ChatGPT because that doesn't have feelings. Number 3 is a total miss. Can you please try again? Okay. I think this generates some additional ideas. I'm not super duper happy with this, but I think it gives you a sense of how it can help you generate some ideas for campaign taglines as you're putting together your campaign. And then very lastly, I want to figure out some of the colors that I should be using for my campaign website too. So I think something that's interesting here is that it generated these ideas here. I think these are just like in general, they're not really specific. In a previous example, when I played with this, it actually referenced the Invest in Kids website. And then it returned back some of the hex colors on that website. So I thought that was pretty impressive, but it's not giving me the proper responses for this one here. All right. And let's move on to a different example since it looks like we're coming up on time pretty soon. The one I want to show you here, here's a different peer-to-peer campaign that's powered by Cosvox. Let's say you're doing peer-to-peer, and then let's say you have a fundraiser. And one of the things you can do is, as a fundraiser, as an individual, I can even use this for my fundraising too. So let's do a new chat here. Let's ask it to rewrite someone's a personal fundraising page to make it a little bit more personal. And a lot of folks that are not professional fundraisers, they kind of find it hard to really figure out what to write. So this is Oliver's fundraising page here. He has a hello, a greeting, and then he talks about the program, and then it becomes a little bit of boilerplate text over here. So let's go into what ChatGPT came back with. I prompted it to rewrite this to have more of a conversational or personal tone. And the output of this is actually pretty good. It gives it more of a personal touch to it that helps improve someone's writing. So let's say I'm Oliver and I want to use this response and to send it out via email. So I want to kind of summarize this information into a 100-word email. I can prompt ChatGPT to do this. And that's what it did. So this is pretty good. It basically summarized everything in perfect spelling and grammar. It has the specific goalpost of $2,500, and then a reference to organization and thanks to donors. So it's a pretty serviceable email. I think for folks who are not professional fundraisers, who are just like volunteer fundraisers or peer-to-peer, this is actually probably better than a lot of emails that individual fundraisers will write to friends. And then very lastly here, I could turn this into a social media post. Okay. So I think these are generally, it gives folks like an idea on what to post. Because sometimes writing that is hard. All right. The last use case is around storytelling. So what do we want to do? Storytelling. Let's do KET. So this is Kentucky Educational Television. This is another campaign site on Cosvox. I'm gonna kind of speed through this one because we're running a little bit short on time. So I want to paste it as fundraising appeal, and then the goal is to figure out how we could tell a better story. So this content they have on their campaign site is pretty informational, and it's not really focused on the story. It doesn't really have a narrative to it. So the hypothesis is that if we can have more of a narrative, then content would be more compelling. If it was more compelling, the folks would make a donation. So basically the prompt is, here's the fundraising appeal, give me 2 variations of the opening paragraph. So they gave you 2 variations. One's very question-oriented, so it kind of draws the reader in. And then one is a little bit more about excitement. So it draws the reader in as well. So I think these are pretty good ideas. Now, let's say I'm trying to figure out what kind of story arcs to use. I can do this too. I can ask ChatGPT, what are some of the story arcs? Okay, great. So it does some of this. Great. Rewrite the fundraising appeal with the hero's journey. Story arc. Let's see if this works. One of the problems with ChatGPT is that since it's a robot, it always seems very, very confident, has zero doubt, unless it says, "Hey, I can't do this." So sometimes it'll basically, what they say, hallucinate. It may give you inaccurate information or stuff that doesn't really make sense. So you always have to review it with more of a careful eye. So I think this is kind of interesting, like based off of the input. Is talking about the telefund as a hero. This is not actually what I was trying to go for, but I think you can get kind of an idea of how it could take like different story arcs and then apply it to something that you inputted. Let me take a different direction here. Let's say I wanted to generate a short story for a fundraising appeal based off of just some bullet points. You know, the genre is real life, settings at underfunded high school, character is a John, yes, hunger to learn, and the plot is that John must overcome his hurdles of daily life. Okay. So let's see if we could generate a story based off of this. So it's giving me a pretty good story. You know, it's totally just made this up, where it's kind of interesting. You know, it's about inner city. The school lacked basic resources. John was determined. So he spent a lot of time at the library, worked part-time at a fast food restaurant. So I totally didn't prompt it to do this, but I guess it associated kind of underprivileged schools with part-time fast food work and excelled at school. Okay. And then there's a fundraising campaign. Okay, great. And then he started donating his own money. Okay. And because a donor is like John, the campaign was a success. So it's kind of interesting where it is an interesting story. I wouldn't say it's compelling, but it's very interesting where it gives you a sense of, okay, here's a story that maybe we can use for a nonprofit based off of just like a few little inputs. I think it's really great for kind of creating these ideas, and then you can kind of tweak it and tailor it to something that really makes sense. One of the things I like to do is experiment with this. So I can ask it to make this story more focused on the community. A very general prompt. So then it changes the story where it's more about the community and less about John. So it kind of gives a different perspective on this. So that's something you can play with too. You know, if there's different stakeholders, different players in your nonprofit story, then you can ask ChatGPT to shift this narrative a little bit to match your organization. Then very lastly here, let's condense this so it fits into an email blurb, which is really great. ChatGPT is really great at condensing info, text summarization, as they call it. So you can take this long form content, squish it into like bite-sized social media posts or for email newsletters or for internal summaries, that kind of stuff. All right. All right, so let's move back to my presentation since I am grossly over time, and I'll speed through a few things. I'm just going to point out some of the resources that I have in this slide deck, and then you all can kind of take a look, and then I want to just carve out some time for some questions. All right, so I do have a section for writing tones. I thought a lot about this, where you can have more of a conversational tone, humorous tone, et cetera, persuasive tone. So you can actually shift one piece of content that you write and then ask ChatGPT to shift it to match your audience. So I find it really interesting. You could use a lot of different general use cases for ChatGPT, like for idea generation, as some ideas over here as a writing assistant, search engine. One thing I want to flag is that as an analyst, not so good. I tried feeding it data sets. For basic data sets, it's fine. But for anything that's complicated, like with a spreadsheet of more than 10 rows of data, it starts to break down and gives you inaccurate data. So just be aware of this. Content repurposer, ChatGPT is really great for. In this slide deck, I also have just a bunch of slides on different prompts you can try out. Anything from creating an email ask for donations for Giving Tuesday, to writing descriptions, to creating 2-minute, to creating video scripts. All this stuff are some additional things you can play with. Core here are some implications. I really do think that, like the calculator, like other tools, it'll improve efficiency for experienced fundraisers. And then also it'll reduce the on-ramp time for beginner fundraisers and communications professionals. I think the output that we get will actually be more creative, even though it's kind of directing us to something that's more average. It gets to the point where we can focus the bulk of our mental energy and our time on the creativity, the creative aspect of it. So once you get to like the foundational piece, which is what ChatGPT gives you, then you can actually tweak and tailor and finish whatever work that you're trying to do. So I find it really interesting. We do have a few resources here. We do have a blog post on ChatGPT for nonprofits, which I'll paste in over here. And if you do need further help or training for your organization on ChatGPT, feel free to contact us at support@cosvox.com. We have tons of resources, as well as we have a managed services education team over here that can assist with that. Wrapping this up, if you do have any questions on ChatGPT, or if you need help with your donation page or peer-to-peer fundraising, feel free to take a look at cosvox.com. We'll be happy to help you with that. All right, let's move on to any questions that we have. Kind of sped through that last part very quickly. So if you have any questions, I'll stay on for as long as we need to, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. All right, feel free to chat us into the webinar chat, as well as use the Q&A function. Thank you for almost everybody for staying on with us. This session is recorded. Video recording will be sent out, as well as the slides will be sent out tomorrow. So look out for that, because I just glossed through a lot of my slides. All right, let me see. So Jamie, yes, the session is recorded. We have a question from Wendy. Wendy's asking, she's been using ChatGPT a lot, including first drafts for LOIs. Biggest problem, can't create a library to pull from. Yeah, yep. So that's a limitation with ChatGPT. You can't really train it really well with your own data. The only way to really do it is if you have a specific conversation with it. If you remember when I was sharing my screen on ChatGPT with my browser window, I could start a new kind of a chat function. So for example, when I was trying to train it to act as a donor database, I would feed it specific info about donor records, just the sample data, and then it will be able to recall and reference some of that information. So I think the only way, Wendy, for you to do this is if you feed ChatGPT a lot of your grant info, as you're mentioning, and then try to get it to recall that as a library. All right. A bunch of questions. All right, Christine is asking, could you use it for rewriting a web page for SEO if you give it the keyword? Short answer is yes. the steps to do that is you'll take the content for the page, you'll copy and paste it into ChatGPT, and then the prompt you'll say is below is the content for my blog post. You can say, give me recommendations to optimize for blah 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 keyword, and it'll do that. One of the limitations is that ChatGPT cannot access an outside link anymore. It used to be able to do this since I was feeding it spreadsheets, but it doesn't do it anymore. So you just have to paste in the content. Gene says, thanks, Rob Ott. Yeah, I actually call myself Rob the Robot sometimes. So hopefully that was helpful. All right. Other questions? All right, another question that just came in is, how ethical is it to use letters and text produced by the chat? So this is a great area that needs to be addressed for every organization that plans to use ChatGPT, is that a lot of big companies put a restriction, even schools put a restriction on folks using ChatGPT, mainly because of client proprietary data or even donor data. So this is something that your organization needs to consider. Like, if you're feeding ChatGPT info, then is that data proprietary? Is that data confidential? So those are some of the questions that you kind of need to ask before it's implemented across your organization. If you're in a smaller organization, which I think most of our folks here are today, then that should be a pretty easy calculus to do, where the increase in productivity and time saved is totally worth it. Well, if you're in a larger organizations with a legal department, for example, that's something that you probably need to work through. Eileen's asking, what do you mean when you say feeding ChatGPT info? So feeding ChatGPT info, meaning in the basic sense, is just copy and pasting text into it. Let's say I have a blog post or a fundraising appeal. I can feed it that fundraising appeal by copying and paste the text into the chat window. You can also feed it spreadsheets, as in, like, if you copy and paste an Excel spreadsheet, like the table, you can paste it in, and then ChatGPT will try to like digest it, although it doesn't work really well in most circumstances. So that's what it means by feeding it. Pamela's asking, what's the main difference with the free and paid versions? The only difference is that the paid $20 a month version has more reliable access. So the free version sometimes a little bit slow. It's not too slow, but sometimes it kind of crawls a little bit, or sometimes they'll say they're overloaded. Please come back later. It's a little bit frustrating when you're trying to use ChatGPT or play around with it. For my purposes today, I'm using the paid version so that I can have reliable access for today's webinar. All right. We have another question is, can you paste in the link to the resource? So yes, let me paste that in into the chat. Okay, thank you, Carrie, for that question. Cheryl's asking, you were copying and pasting from the campaign page. Yes, I was, the fundraising appeals from the CauseVox campaign site. Could you just put in the URL for that page? The short answer is no, it can't do that. It used to be able to do that, but not anymore. So the best way to do it is if you copy and paste in text. Let me see. All right. Any other questions today? Michael's asking, he's based in a country where ChatGPT is not available. Workaround. I don't have any. I don't have any ideas on that one, but there are ways. I can tell you there are ways to work around Netflix restrictions through VPNs. So you might want to investigate that. All right. We had another question from before, is asking, if I entered in the home address for a donor prospect, would it pull up? And the answer is no. Yeah, I think ChatGPT considers that as private information. Slides will be shared, recording will be shared. All right. I think I answered most of these questions today. Thank you all for joining us. Again, this recording will be shared tomorrow as well as the slides. And I do have one more poll. For folks who are still on, if you could do me a favor and do this poll for me, that would be great. It's basically just asking how likely would you recommend this webinar, trying to get some feedback to see how we could tailor our education and content here at CosWalks to be more valuable to our audience. I think this one has had a lot of registrations, super excited about that. And it also, taking this poll will help inform whether we should continue on with topics like ChatGPT or go in a different direction, all that stuff. So thank you so much for doing that. All right, folks. Well, thank you so much for the time today. We talked about ChatGPT. We talked about some use cases for it. We talked about CosVox. We had a lot of fun, a lot of questions. If you do have any questions that I didn't answer today, feel free to ping me. My email is rob@cosvox.com. If you don't want to send an email to me directly, you can always contact our general support inbox, which is support@cosvox.com, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much for the time today. I really appreciate your time and attention, and good luck with ChatGPT.